The purpose of this seminar really was to bring together those attorneys that mainly do PI on the plaintiff's side in a little different context so that you could hear what I consider people who are the preeminent practitioners of the art of PI in the state of Texas. And when we were trying to put this together, we also wanted to maybe even go a little bit further. And the name David Garrett came to my attention by somebody in my office, and I really didn't know David at all. And then I started kind of looking up what he did and what he's done. And more importantly, he has some connections in Houston. He was licensed in Texas, had a daughter that went to the University of Houston Law School, and has had a very successful practice in Muskogee, Tulsa, Oklahoma, and parts beyond. I was telling him that I had an uncle that grew up in Muskogee, so being an Okie from Muskogee was kind of close and dear to my heart. So David's information is there in the program that you have. It's that green document that should be in front of you. It tells his background, family lineage, how long his family's been practicing law. He's had major victories in many areas, but now is focusing on some 1983 litigation, which I think will be inspirational and give you something to think about. So David, why don't you come up and tell us about practicing law in Oklahoma, Texas, and beyond.
Hey, like you said, I'm David Garrett. I'm an Okie from Muskogee. When I finished law school at Tulsa, I came here in 1968 to Houston and worked for an accounting firm called PPITAS for a couple of years. Took the Texas bar, the Texas CPA, passed them both, and quit my job because I didn't like accounting. I'm ADD, only got the drug about 3 years ago to slow me down, and so because of that, I've had about 30 careers, all in the practice of law. After that, I helped some guys start a real estate development company that still exists called Moody Rambin Interests. I was a partner in that for about 5 years. Then I had a law practice where I restricted my practice to real estate developers in what I call the Gold Building, 777 Post Oak Boulevard it's called now, I think. I left here in '82 when I broke my hip and went to Oklahoma to rehabilitate and come back. Clerked in my uncle's law office. I was on crutches with a bunch of steel in my leg. I'd flushed my pharmaceutical jar of Percodan down the toilet because it made me, I still hurt but didn't care. And started seeing people that were accused of serious crimes or a big truck had run over for whom there seemed no justice. And my Uncle Douglas, who'd been practicing law there in Muskogee since the 30s, seemed to know how to make those kind of things happen. And I got inspired. I got a license in Oklahoma and became a trial lawyer. Sorry for the long intro, but you see my genealogy thing, and that's not really it. I'm a product liability lawyer, okay? That's what I ended up being. But to become that, I volunteered for a year to do preliminaries and trials for the indigent. Did 40 preliminaries my first year and 7 jury trials my next. The first civil case I filed was just like Bob. I filed a product liability case in federal court on formaldehyde poisoning. But I wasn't as smart as Bob, and I didn't get the whole industry. I wish I had. I've prepared for trial about 40 product cases in about 8 or 10 or 15 states. There's some resume I got floating around that says all the places we've done that. I've gotten the Chinese government in trial in California and had a way to collect the money, I thought, and had a real good judge on it. But my client went south. You know, you can't have everything all the time, except the kind of case I'm about to tell you about. 1983, okay? About 6 years ago, a friend of mine called me up and said, David, this lady's in the prison. She says that this county jail she was in, the girls had to show their breasts just to get a glass of ice water. A place called Custer County, which is about 100 miles west of Oklahoma City. Small rural county. There's a college in the next town over. I said, well, that doesn't seem right. There ought to be something you can do about that. You know, and I looked up, and the Governmental Tort Claim Act in Oklahoma didn't allow you to recover for that kind of stuff. It's exempt from action. I'd done 1 or 2 1983 cases before that time. I did a case one time where the police required drunks to walk down a 20-foot high concrete stair without a railing. And I had this guy who fell, of course, being dead drunk. He didn't die, but he broke his back. But the courts looked at it more like it was a single act of negligence rather than a policy. And as you'll see in the papers I have here, its policies has to be a policy of the governmental entity that allows you to go after them. Now you can't go after the states. They're exempt under the 11th Amendment, okay? But any governmental actor besides a state is free game which includes counties, cities, governmental units. In Oklahoma, I'm in a suit right now with something called the Comanche County Correction Center, which was a subdivision deal that is not even run by the sheriff. It's run by the county commissioners, but it's a separate government entity. In Oklahoma, we have a law that says that when you get a judgment against a governmental unit, they have to raise the taxes and pay you over 3 years, period. You know, if there's an appeal, after the appeal, whatever, when it's a final judgment. And so you don't have to worry about insurance or anything. We have a case we're doing now against the state of Oklahoma's employees who were acting in the courses, who were acting under color of law at a prison, and through Freedom of Information discovery, before I filed the case, I got copies of all the state's insurance policies and found out who was covered, who was not. And so the supervisory personnel are the ones who are covered. We've done about 40 depositions in that case, and it'll be going to trial in about 6 months. If it goes, I don't think it'll go. The facts are so bad, I think they'll pay us not to do it. Anyway, we've not tried a case yet. I tell you, I told the two ladies, remember I told you about? I went, and this is not just in the outline, we'll talk about the law in a minute, but these stories are always great. There are 5 or 6 women's prisons in Oklahoma, and I met these first two. They said, oh, go see so and so and so, and I went to see them, and they said, go see so and so and so. And so one of the lawyers in my office took the video camera, and I went, I asked questions, he videoed, and then we had it transcribed, so it was real nice, you know, stuff to work off of, and better than I used to do. And but all we got was people getting patted on the rear, being groped, no actual sex, which I didn't think was gross enough to go from to bring it to the oh my God level that I think you need to be a successful in 1983 case. And so I wrote a letter to every woman who had been in that county jail for 2 years. Sent my investigator over, didn't ask the clerk, sent the investigator over, got a list of all the names, addresses, wrote them letters, and we got a few more interesting cases. We got the sheriff's girlfriend, who was in drug court under his supervision, who supervised her urine samples, and did horrible things to her against her will. Got that, 2 or 3 other rape cases involving the sheriff, and all kinds of stuff. Anyway, we investigated all this, and we filed our lawsuit in federal court in the Western. And Oklahoma has 3 federal courts. Can you believe that? A little state like Oklahoma, 3 million people and 3 federal courts. There's a political reason for it, but we have 3 districts. And I filed this from the Western District, and we wanted some help, we thought, from law enforcement. And so we tried to get the Oklahoma has something called the OSBI. It's like the FBI, but it's in local Oklahoma. It's like the Texas Rangers, I think, here. And they wouldn't talk to us. And so at that time, the Attorney General was my dear friend, a guy named Drew Edmondson, who used to try cases against when he was a DA in Muskogee. And we got the OSBI to talk to us. And we said, here's our clients, here's what they're saying. You guys can go talk to them. And so they did. We went with them, said only two conditions. You can't tape or video them. Otherwise, you can talk to them all you want, just as long as we're there with them. And so they did. The investigator ended up writing a report about the sheriff. They had like 700 counts they could have filed. They didn't file that many. They had to get out of the county, had to get a new DA out of the county, and a different judge out of the county. At the preliminary hearing, the defense lawyer was using a picture of me like this, because I used to be a TV lawyer for about 15 years in Oklahoma, and I'm very well known in Oklahoma. I can go anywhere, and almost everybody in the room knows who I am. And so he had a big picture of me going around talking, which I figured that's how he's going to try the case too. So I didn't get to go to trial. I got to watch the preliminary, and the others tried the case. Never tried, unfortunately. But because they paid us, after the sheriff got tried, there was one juror who would not believe the women, even though there were like 12 women that testified about the things that the sheriff and his deputies did to him. He wasn't going to believe the women, except he did believe the sheriff. And the sheriff said, well, she's my girlfriend. He thought he was exempt under the, Oklahoma has a rape statute like most states that say if you're in charge of the person, either in a jail, prison, as a teacher and other authorities over them, and if you have sex with that person, even if you claim it's consensual, it's rape because of your authority over the person. And that's the law here in Texas as well, I think. Anyway, he did testify that he had sex with her, although he said it was consensual. And so they found him guilty of a bunch of charges he was found guilty of. He got 85 years. I have a cite for his appeal that was denied. He's serving time in Kansas. We took his video trial deposition after the trial, which it's a lot of fun to take someone who's accused of a crime or who's done criminal work to take their video trial deposition, because as long as you have a foundation and basis for the questions, you can ask them all kind of horrible things to which they say, I refuse to answer. It's almost like getting into a closing argument for 6 hours and goes through all the stuff. And isn't it true that blah, 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 I refuse to answer. And don't take a stipulation from the lawyer, make him say it every time so you can cut out what you want in the video trial. Anyway, we settled that case for $10 million on a bunch of women that were abused who were all convicted felons and jailbirds. Who would have thought? Well, about a year into that case, somebody called me, a guy I knew from politics, and he said his wife had been arrested, and the people in Delaware County, where Grand Lake is, it's a big resort place in Oklahoma, had been kind of unkind to her and had done some things, feely, touchy, maybe inside her body. And so I went and saw her on a Saturday, and this one I took my lawyer that worked with me on the case, and he did the whole case. I didn't do any work besides the first sign-up. We followed the daisy chain of who all did what, all that kind of stuff. Only got about 5 or 6 people that knew each other that referred us to witness. We'd go interview witnesses, and if they wanted to hire us, they could. If they didn't want to, that's fine, but we'd go interview them to see what had happened. And so we had to write letters again, which I did. We ended up with a lot of clients. One of them died mysteriously. Our office was, papers were examined every day for a week, we know of, because we videotaped it by a woman who had been a prostitute in this county and strangely enough had moved to Tulsa to go to work for this cleaning service. We couldn't link it up, we tried. But it was good enough. We settled that case for $13.5 million. Now this was just about a year and a half ago. We have cases going on right now in the Western District against Comanche County Correctional Center in Lawton, which has worse facts than I've ever seen, believe it or not. And then we have one going on. After the first case was over, the one out in Comanche County, I was reading the Tulsa World one day, and it was talking about the Oklahoma City newspaper, and it was talking about this lawyer who had just gotten his clients off of being accused of molesting women from the prison on the governor's mansion yards. And this lawyer was talking about what a great job he did. And it was the same lawyer that had my name around saying what a bad guy I was. So I investigated, made a couple of phone calls, looked up some stuff in the paper, and turned out that the guy who was in charge of the grounds for the governor's mansion in Oklahoma had women from the female prison come over to take care of the flowers, and he took care of more than that. Or he'd write them up bad, and they'd lose their good time, they'd get out of where they could leave, they have to go to another prison, might cost them 5 years, all kinds of horrible things happened, or could happen. And statute was about to run. You have a 2-year statute on these things, I believe, which we treat them all that way. And so, I'm sorry, I'm out of water. So one of the women had a lawyer, and I called her up, I said, what are you doing for your client's civil action? She said, what do you mean? And I said, well, you need to be suing some folks. And she said, well, it's exempt under the Oklahoma Governmental Tort Claim Act. And I said, yeah, but it's not exempt under civil rights law, under Title 42, Section 1983, if we can prove certain things. And so she referred that client to me, and I found everybody else that had been abused talking to them as witnesses, and they all hired us, and we filed a lawsuit. And at that time, there was a governor's race going on. The guy who was governor at the time this was happening was a Democrat, and I'm a Democrat, and I didn't want to embarrass him because there was a governor's race coming up where we thought a Democrat might get elected. Of course, it didn't. You know, we're more conservative in Oklahoma than you guys are in Texas, believe it or not, if that's possible. But it is true, believe me, it is true. So I filed the case, waited 180 days, dismissed the case, refiled it a year later. In Oklahoma, we have a savings statute where you can refile a case after you've dismissed it one time. I don't know if you have that in Texas, but it's a great thing in Oklahoma. That case is, we went ahead and did discovery on the case while it was dismissed using Freedom of Information. Got the insurance policies on the prison, on the guys that worked at the governor's mansion, on the fellows that worked at the other places that were involved, we thought, in not failing to take action. And that case we've about finished discovery in it. We have 2 employees that at a supervisory level who one of them had 5 events that he knew about and took no action. And so we'll call that deliberate indifference. When this guy, Tony, came to work to run the grounds, within 2 weeks, there was a young lady volunteer that came in tears because he'd been talking to her about being a dyke and see if she wanted to go do a little three-way or something. This little 18-year-old girl. And so they just, oh, that's just horseplay, and they fired her, got her transferred, and that was it. And then there was a woman who he ended up having a relationship for about a year. In fact, after she got out of prison, she moved in with him. And she would bring him to work when his motorcycle wasn't working. And the guy in charge of the whole facility saw her bringing him to work and knew something was, but no one looked at, no investigation. And just all kinds of things. But the reason I say that is because you have to have some sort of notice. You have to have either notice or you have to have it so bad that anybody would have known anyway. You have to have it as a policy. I mean, I've written 5 pages there. I have a 20-page outline here, but I thought I'd just talk about the interesting parts, the fun stuff, because I had no idea that you could help so many people that are convicted criminals. We've done a lot of mock jury trials of these things to see how jurors react, and as long as they say all the bad stuff they've done, every bit of it, what all they've been convicted of, then they're just, and then they talk about how they're being abused by people in power and authority, where they can't do anything, they're believed. And when you have people who don't even know each other telling the same story that happened over a period of time, we've had a chief federal judge go to tears on the 2 settlement conferences we've had so far. We had one county told they could pay us $13.5 million or expect $50 to $100 million judgment against them. Your choice. I never thought you could settle in these cases because I didn't think the commissioners in Oklahoma, that's who runs the county in Oklahoma, would have the nerve to write that big a check that's not covered by insurance. But they do when they hear what the alternative is. So that's why I'm talking about those cases. We have another case we're working on where a fellow was convicted wrongfully because of some phony baloney testimony by the so-called expert for the police department. And 10 years ago, he started asking for his DNA, which no one could find until last year. They found his DNA finally, and he wasn't the one. He was not the man, and so he's been released from prison, been found not guilty by the appellate court, by our Supreme Court. And Oklahoma provides that he can sue the state for up to $175,000, I think. But I think it's a 1983 case because of the gross indifference and all kinds of things they didn't do and didn't follow and didn't allow. And I think it's a $10 million case. We're talking to him now. He hasn't hired a ship, but he may. Because his lawyers think that he's talking to other lawyers who think it's a $175,000 case. I said, that'll cover discovery about $175,000. And anyway, that's that. I'll answer questions or I'll talk about what the law is here, but I've already written the outline about the law, so I'll just told you the stuff that went with it. Anybody got questions? Yes, sir.
How does the Tort Claims Act, which protects governmental entities in Texas, compare to that of Oklahoma?
Speak louder.
Okay. The tort law protections in Texas for governmental entities are probably significantly different from those in Oklahoma. I was wondering if these out there comparison.
Well, you don't bring a Tort Claim Act. You bring an action under a federal law that was passed in 1866 to force the states and state actors to not take away people's rights and duties they got. Okay, that's the reason. And but like I say, it's not a single event. It has to be a policy or a failure to train when they know what's going on or when they ignore it. There's a whole series of things you can find. But it's a deprivation of rights, privileges, immunities. You know, they're entitled to. And you can sue under federal statutes. I mean, the longer version of this outline I have, if the federal, there's a whole series of cases. If you have one that comes up, I'll give you all the citations on a couple of page deal I have here, where you can actually bring the action under the federal statute to enforce the rights that way as well, also under 1983. But the beauty of it is, if you lose the case, you don't pay the other side's attorney fees. And you know, if you got 1,000 hours in it, 300 an hour, 200 an hour, that's $200,000 plus whatever the jury gives you, and you share it with your client on whatever basis you. We work on a 50% contract. I don't know if that's allowed in Texas or not. That's what we do in Oklahoma. You know, take the recovery less case expense and split it 50-50, and no one complains about that because no one else is doing. I don't know of anyone doing cases like this in the country except for me and the group I've created to do it. This is done by lawyers in my office, lawyers outside my office that I put together and form little teams and do. So that's why I'm talking about that. I've done some other interesting things, like I got the Chinese government in court one time in Sacramento, California, in federal court. On the law side, I did a series of rifle cases, SKS rifle defective product cases, throughout the 90s. Like we had like 8 or 9 cases all over the country, and recovered in each one of them. But anyway, that's another story. And we did a dram shop case in Oklahoma City. They paid us $1 million to do a bench trial, and the judge gave us $18 million. Against Fridays. Rather than argue about the last $3 million on the punitive part, we worked out a settlement. I can't say more. It's all gone now, and it's not reported, although I talk about it some. The first serious trial I was ever involved in was about 15 years ago in Muskogee, involving a $10,000 insurance policy. Back then, Oklahoma had small ones, 10, 20s, and they were not treating my lady very well. And so we waited, and the guy that ran into her sued her. So then we sued her back and counterclaimed the insurance company so we could stay in state court. And we got a $6,300,000 verdict, and collected a whole lot of it shortly after that. Also got the law firm that defended it liquidated. We tried after that about 7 more cases, and we could never go more than the second day of trial. They never let us go. Usually they'd make us, the number gets so big, like we'd get an offer each break. They'd come in with a bunch of motions, be denied, be denied, be denied. At the first break, after opening, they'd give us an offer, then they'd start. And what the guy I had trial on, Mike Jones, would do, Mike would call, without having discovered him, whoever the company rep was sitting next to counsel, and just put him in the box and cross-examine him for the whole day with the file and everything. And the only open questions he got asked were, what's your name, what do you do, and why are you here? And then every other question is just, isn't that right? Yes, isn't that right? Isn't that right? Isn't that right? And so anyway, that's all I got. If anyone has questions about anything, I'll be here till I have to leave about 4 o'clock. I'd be delighted to work with anybody. If anyone gets calls about people in non-state institutions even state institutions being victimized, I'll come down myself. I'll go see them. I'll interview them myself. I'll be happy to work with you on any basis that we want to work out. Okay, so give me a call if you want, or you can talk to me up here. Okay, thank you very much.
Don't move. It's good to know that in Texas we don't have any problems like that with law enforcement or.
Texas has the highest rate of rapes in prisons in the country, according to the federal statistics.
David Garrett is out of Tulsa. You have his outline in the black bag, and you can find him. He'll be here for a while. If you have any questions about how he's gotten into the 1983 business and tried to bring a little strong law enforcement into Oklahoma.